What's up guys, my name is Ace, and welcome back to another gun guide. This is the series where I go into great detail with all of the stats, as well as some excellent attachment combinations for every gun in Modern Warfare 2. And in today's episode, we're going to be moving on to the 556 Icarus LMG, also known as the Fightlite MCR. And starting it off as always, let's have a look at our damage profile, and with this gun, it's generally going to be a 3 to 5 shot kill. It actually has the exact same damage values to the body compared to the HCR56. And what this means is to get that 3-shot kill, you will have to mix in at least 1 or 2 upper torso shots, depending on whether or not you're hitting limb shots or lower torso shots as well. Additionally, headshots are not particularly useful with this gun in the vast majority of gunfights you're in, but if you do tend to hit a lot of limb shots, mixing a headshot in can ensure that you maintain a 3-shot kill potential up close. Then let's get into our rate of fire, and with this there's no open bolt delay unlike some of the LMGs, and our rate of fire is faster than the HCR56 at 779 rounds per minute. This means we are going to have a faster time to kill as well at 154 milliseconds, which is a very fast time to kill in this game, and even with a 4-shot kill at 231 milliseconds, that's still a very competitive time to kill, especially for mid ranges. Next up, our bullet velocity is just standard for the LMG category at 700 meters per second. And then let's get into our range values. And that's one area where this is slightly worse than the HCR56. Our 3-shot kill potential extends out to 24 meters, whereas our 4-shot kill potential is 40.5 meters. So unlike the HCR, you have to be a little bit more aware of your range values here, and you will be dropping into that 5-shot kill potential quite a bit more often on the 6v6 maps. But after that, let's have a look at our hipfire spread, which is just standard for LMGs. Generally speaking, you only want to hipfire right up close and personal. Then let's get into our idle sway, and as we can see here, there's definitely a fair amount of movement with the sights while aiming down sight, and that could potentially limit you in longer range engagements unless you compensate for that with attachments. And now let's move on to our recoil, and as we can see here, this gun kicks initially basically straight up for the first 5 or 6 shots or so, and then it starts to cut fairly hard to the right. Generally speaking, as long as you're making sure you're getting those first shots on target, this is a very easy to control gun. But as you continue to spray, you will have to start compensating for that horizontal recoil, which is a little more difficult than vertical recoil. Next up, let's get into our handling stats, and our aim down sight time is actually best in the LMG category at 370 milliseconds, so that's great if you're looking to be a bit more aggressive for an LMG. However, our sprint to fire time is still quite slow, and it's basically standard for LMGs at 250 milliseconds. As for a reload add time, this is quite slow at 5.67 seconds. It's not the slowest reloading LMG out there, but this is still a very slow reload time, and you definitely have to plan ahead and prepare for this in the middle of a match. And then finally for the base stats, let's get into our mobility, and with this gun, we have the fastest base movement speed out of the LMGs at 4.38 meters per second. Our sprint speed is also a little on the faster side for LMGs, but not too far out of the ordinary. And then finally, our aim walking movement speed is also the fastest in the LMG category at 2.03 seconds. This is still quite a slow aim walking movement speed though, so it's not like you'll really be able to take full advantage of this in a gunfight. And that right there wraps it up for all of the base stats of this gun, but now let's move on to some of the attachments, and we're going to cover barrels and their ranges. And as we can see here, there's only 2 barrels to use on the 556 Icarus. The first one is the FTAC Cold Forge 16-inch barrel, and with this one, we get a 28% boost to our ranges, which is a very nice boost for this game. Whereas the second barrel, the FTAC SB, this one does hurt our ranges by 14%, which isn't great, especially since we don't have an amazing range profile for an LMG to begin with. As for how these impact our recoil, with the first barrel, typically the barrels that increase our ranges will also help with recoil, but this barrel doesn't, and if anything, just looking at the recoil plots, it seems very slightly worse than the base recoil on this gun, but that could just be down to the little bit of randomness that's included in recoil, whereas with the FTAC SB barrel, this one significantly increases our horizontal recoil especially, but also even with those initial shots fired, you can see the gaps are much higher on that, and therefore I would consider that to be a fairly significant increase to the total recoil of the gun. And then finally for these barrel attachments, let's have a look at our aim down sight speeds, and that 16-inch Cold Forge barrel unfortunately adds a lot of aim down sight time at 450 milliseconds, whereas the SB barrel improves our aim down sight time by about 20 milliseconds. Additionally, I just wanted to have a quick look at our magazine attachments. We only have one magazine attachment on this gun, which is a 100 round box mag, and this one will slow our aim down sight speed down to 410 milliseconds. Honestly, unless it's a class designed for shooting down streaks, I don't really think this penalty to your aim down sight time is worth the extra 25 rounds. And with that, that wraps it up for all of the important stats that I wanted to cover. Now let's move into some excellent attachment combinations, and the first one I'm going to share with you guys is my all-arounder. With this build, the best combination that I found for recoil with muzzle and underbarrel attachments was the Sakin Tread 40 muzzle as well as the VX Pineapple underbarrel. We've got the OLEV laser on there, the Slimline Pro optic, and the X10 grip. And with this, our aim down sight speed is still pretty reasonable for an LMG at 410 milliseconds. Our sprint out time is improved to the point where it's now better than all of the assault rifles in the game. And quite importantly, this improves our recoil very nicely as well. This is a very accurate, easy to control gun with a reasonable enough aim down sight speed. Now, I did want to point out a little alternative to this one. It's not an entirely different build, but if you don't mind the iron sights on this gun, you can drop that Slimline Pro optic, and I'd recommend putting the Ravage 8 stock on there, and that will bring your aim down sight speed a little bit faster, but you just lose that added precision of having the optic, and therefore I feel like you start limiting yourself a bit at really long ranges. Overall though, this is an excellent build to be using with this gun, and my preferred way of running it. Now let's move on to a second build that I've got. And I've noticed a lot of you guys have been requesting class setups using the Canted laser, which personally isn't my preference. I think it does limit you a little bit because you can't like fully aim down sight and see your sights. And on top of that, the laser is always visible, whether you're hip firing or aiming down sight. You're always gonna have a really bright green laser that you can't really control the same way that you can with the other lasers. But having said that, I do feel like the Icarus is well suited to the Canted laser, and therefore I wanted to share one class setup with you guys. So with this, we're using that Canted laser. We've got the FTAC SB barrel because we're not typically going to be challenging people at super long ranges anyway, so we don't have to worry as much about our range values or our recoil or anything, so I've got that on there. We've also got the Ravage 8 stock and X10 grip to help with our aim down sight speed, and then finally the armor piercing rounds just so we can sort of spray and pray at cover and still be dealing a decent amount of damage through that cover. So with this, our aim down sight speed is very noticeably improved at 310 milliseconds. That's much more within the realm of an assault rifle, which is nice and allows you to be a lot more aggressive. And on top of that, our sprint out time is also improved with this setup. Now, when we look at the recoil, you'll definitely see there is more recoil than the base version of this gun. But like I said, if you're using the Canted laser, typically you're not challenging super long range fights anyway, and this is more so geared toward aggression, so it's not a huge deal. And if you are looking for a bit of an alternative with this gun, just a different way to use it, and you like being aggressive, I'd recommend trying this one out. And with that, that's going to wrap it up for today's gun guide on the 556 Icarus. As for my thoughts on this gun, I like it. I like it for what it is. I think you definitely have to be aware of its limitations in relation to the LMGs, the main one being its range values. It does have pretty weak ranges for an LMG at least, but as long as you're aware of that and you keep yourself a little bit closer maybe than the other LMGs out there, then you should be able to find some pretty good success with this. Now, of course, that is just my opinion on the Icarus, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about this gun in the comments down below. And also, if you guys have missed any of the previous episodes, I will leave a link to the playlist in the description of the video. If you enjoyed this one, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.